Good afternoon. I'm Patty Johnson, coordinator of the Southeastern Council of Foundations Engagement Initiative. This afternoon we're delighted to present our program Encore Fellowships Network. It is being sponsored by the Patterson Foundation and presented by Deborah Jacobs of the Patterson Foundation, Leslie Louie of the Encore Fellowships Network, and Carol Kratz of the Virginia G. Piper Charitable Trust. Deborah, I'm going to turn the program over to you, Leslie, and Carol, and I'll let you take it away.
Okay, great. We are very excited. Patty, if you could take us to the agenda.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Deborah Jacobs. I'm absolutely thrilled with the participation on this afternoon's engagement conference. I'm going to first talk a little bit about what SCCF is, because I know we have people who are from the foundation world and not from the foundation world. I'm going to talk about what the engagement initiative is. I'll give you a quickie on our agenda, and then I'm going to introduce our superstars who will be doing the majority of the presentation today. First of all, Southeastern Council of Foundations, you might hear me say SECF, that's the acronym. Southeastern Council of Foundations covers the 11 states in the southeastern region of the United States, and we are a 350-some professional association of those who are in the charitable foundation space. And within the Southeastern Council of Foundations, we have the EngAGEment initiative. And what this is foundations who are funding in the older adult space. It can be anything from intergenerational to health access to healthy living to living at home, anything related to anything related to older adults is part of the EngAGEment initiative. And we have foundations throughout the Southeast to continue to learn and share from each other. With our monthly webinar series, we spotlight what various foundations are doing with their partners, their grantees, for impact so others can learn from us. In this particular instance, I am absolutely so excited because this initiative, while the Patterson Foundation is sponsoring it, we are not a funder of Encore Fellowships, but the way the Patterson Foundation works is, rather than grants, we work with partners, and our focus is on building connective tissue to create new realities through communications, technology, and financial viability models. And as you listen today and engage in conversation about Encore Fellows, I think you'll definitely see this as an asset-based strategy to truly have greater impact in the nonprofit sector. So we are all about sharing and learning, and I want to now go through our agenda today. I'm doing the welcome, you can already tell that. Leslie Louie is going to give us the overview of this national program. Carol Kratz is going to give us an example of a program that is thriving in the Arizona area, and then we're going to share with you what is going on in the southeastern United States in terms of opportunities bubbling. And as Patty said, we welcome questions not only throughout the presentation, but we'll have time at the end that we've allotted for that. So let me tell you a little bit about Leslie and Carol. Leslie Louie, and I'm going to give you a brief little bio on her, this is a was in her past, so you can see how her life has changed over the previous couple of years, was a general manager and vice president at Hewlett-Packard. During her 20-year career, Louie held numerous senior sales, marketing, operations, and finance positions in this high-tech industry, both in the United States and in Europe. In 2009, she actually retired, and if you could see what Leslie looked like, you're going to give new definition to early retiree. But she participated in the Silicon Valley Encore Fellows pilot, working at Partners in School Innovation. During her part-time, year-long fellowship, Leslie implemented a performance management system, revamped the human services policies and procedures, and had a 4-month stint as the interim executive director during a leadership transition. Leslie credits the fellowship with enabling her to make a successful transition from an extensive for-profit career as an Encore career in the social sector. In 2010, Leslie became the National Director of the Encore Fellows Network for Civic Ventures. She's responsible for scaling the program nationally. She holds an MBA from the Stanford Graduate School of Business, a BA from UCLA, and a Coral Foundation Fellow in Public Affairs in San Francisco. Our other main presenter today is Carol Kratz. Carol is the program officer of the Virginia Piper Charitable Trust based in Scottsdale, Arizona. As program director of the Virginia Piper Charitable Trust, Carol works with the board of directors to evaluate proposals in the area of older adults in arts and culture. She's also responsible for reviewing grant proposals and meeting with potential grantees and visiting nonprofit locations. Previously, Carol worked for the Maricopa Association of Governments in accommodating the human services needs of children, families, older adults, and people with disabilities. She holds a Master of Public Administration degree from the University of Pittsburgh's Graduate School of Public and International Affairs and a bachelor's degree in political science from the Chatham College in Pittsburgh. She has served on the board of directors of Grantmakers in Aging and was a member of the Leadership Council of the National Council of Aging. I had the opportunity to meet Carol in my very early days at the Patterson Foundation at Grantmakers in Aging, and subsequently heard Leslie Louis talk at a Grantmakers for Effective Organizations presentation on how networks can work for the greater good. So I'm thrilled to be able to connect both of them with leaders in the southeastern part of the United States. And after this, in Carol's modesty, she may not share this, but just 2 weeks ago, the Arizona Republic spotlighted the Encore Fellows endeavor that her foundation is leading out in Arizona. So the national media and the regional media is paying attention to this movement of how to deploy resources for the greater good. So with this, I'm going to turn it over to Leslie, who's going to take us on through the program.
Thank you, Deborah, for that lovely introduction, and more importantly for inviting Civic Ventures Encore Fellows Program to participate in this forum. And Patty, if you could move to the next slide, I'd appreciate that. Go ahead, next slide. After that. I would first like to welcome everyone on the line, and we're so excited to share information about the Encore concept and specifically the Encore Fellows Program today. We hope that you find it useful in your work and thinking about the possibilities, and we welcome your engagement and feedback throughout today's session, but also afterwards. So my objectives for the next 20 minutes or so are to share some information about Encore Fellows and take your questions about how it might interweave with your own work and lay the foundation for what are Encore Fellows, how does it work, where is it currently offered. And then we'll move on to Carol and then share a little bit about what's actually happening in the southeastern U.S. with Daryl and Betsy. And hopefully we'll get some time in there for some Q&A. A little bit about Civic Ventures. Civic Ventures is a national nonprofit based in San Francisco. It is a think tank and a program incubator on boomers and social purpose work. Perhaps best known for coining the idea of an encore stage of life and encore careers, which is work in that stage of life, and one of its signature programs, which is the Encore Fellowships Network. Next, please. I'd like to start with a little bit of background on Civic Ventures and Encore Fellows within that. Civic Ventures was founded 14 years ago by Mark Friedman, who is a well-known author. A couple of his books are Encore and The Big Shift. As I mentioned, Civic Ventures is a national think tank and program incubator. Another one of its programs is the Purpose Prize, and yet another is Experience Corps, all very successful programs operating in this space. So Mark's big idea was that, we all know that there's tremendous challenges in the world today and in our country, and that human talent is at the heart of solving those problems. And Mark further believes, and has spoken a lot about this, is that there's a source of large untapped human talent in the baby boomers and people who have their midlife careers. And in fact, many of these people carry huge amounts of assets and skills and experiences and are looking for opportunities to have a new Encore stage of work that combines continued income, personal meaning, and social impact. We call that new stage of work the Encore stage of work, and it's the fundamental idea behind Encore Fellows. So with all these people wanting to do this work and the baby boomers in large numbers, we still recognize that many people wanted this work, but that barriers existed. Among those were lack of a network, some resistance from the nonprofits, lack of resources. And so Civic Ventures realized that transitional pathways and programs were needed. So they came up with this idea called Encore Fellows. And it's the idea that you can use a structured transitional assignment, taking a person with great experience like I had, and who wanted to do this work, and have them in a fellowship structure. In 2009, Civic Ventures designed and ran a very successful pilot. I was in that pilot, had a tremendous experience, one that changed my life. I was able to actually prove to myself and others that my skills were actually transferable and that I could have a significant impact on a local nonprofit. So what we saw was that it was a private sector and nonprofit sector collaboration model, bringing the sector talent from the private sector and those skills to the nonprofit sector. That particular pilot was funded by the David and Lucille Packard Foundation, NHP, my former employer. Based on that huge success and then a follow-up independent program evaluation, Civic Ventures realized that they had a great opportunity to expand this program, and so spent the next couple of years working on an expansion strategy, and in fact asked me and my colleague Lyle Hurst if we would lead up that scaling effort. I'm very happy to say that in the following 2 years, including in 2011, a national network of organizations, so these are in 12 different metros, are expanding the program across the United States, such that we recently named the 100th fellow, which is tenfold growth in 18 months. So it really shows you the power of this idea. Next slide. So let's get into some of the details about what exactly are Encore Fellows. As I mentioned earlier, Encore Fellows are a significant new source of talent brought to the task of solving social problems for the greater good. They are structured transitional assignments matching highly experienced and skilled professionals from the private sector with nonprofits, government agencies, schools, etc. Specifically, the fellows take on roles that leverage their specific deep experience to deliver significant impact to their host organizations in capacity building roles. So that's the basic structure and purpose of an Encore Fellowship. Next slide. Let's look at some typical Encore Fellow roles. The fellows, they bring a wide variety of skills, management experience, leadership talent, and so we see them taking roles typically in a wide variety of functions, typically reporting to a senior executive in the nonprofit in a capacity building role. So you see here a wide range of roles, process improvement, human resources, IT, strategic planning, And they've been able to successfully fulfill those roles across those functions, across a wide range of social sectors, making the point, proving the point that this type of talent can have a major impact in those nonprofits. So we see different social sectors, different geographies, different roles, all of which Encore Fellows can operate successfully within. Next slide. So what has actually happened in terms of their experience, and what do the Encore Fellows benefit from? First of all, they derive great satisfaction from making a significant contribution to a social purpose organization, and that nonprofit benefits tremendously. The fellows also learn about social purpose work because it is a cross-sector transition. They develop practical experience in the nonprofit sector, and this is paid work. It's stipended work, typically $20,000 to $35,000 for a half-time full-year role. The reason that compensation is so important is because it connotes the value of the work. And we feel it's very important that both sides of the relationship, the fellow and the nonprofit, are valuing this work. So this stands separately from traditional, say, volunteer work or board work. It's a very intensive, contribution-oriented fellowship. The other thing that the fellows benefit from are developing a network of new contacts and resources for the future. Again, these folks are typically coming from the private sector. They're looking to transition into the nonprofit sector, make a contribution, and because of that, they are looking for a network of new resources and contacts that can help them do that, and the fellowship provides that. Next slide. So I did mention that the first year was 2009. We have been through an extensive expansion period, and as of the end of 2011, there are 10 programs across, I think, 7 states. So that's that tenfold growth. They stretch everywhere from Washington to New York to New Mexico, Arizona, and of course all across California and Portland. We do have developmental work going in other parts of the country. Very happy about that, and we do strongly believe that the program can be successful in every state in the United States, in urban, suburban, and rural environments, and that the need exists and the opportunity exists in every part of our country. However, you will notice that there is a lack of yellow circles in certain parts of the country, which we are definitely wanting to change. So we're looking to expand the program. Next slide, please. I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about the elements of the Encore Fellow experience, just highlighting a couple of them. I've already mentioned that it does involve high-impact work. So this is not stuffing envelopes. It's not volunteer work. You are embedded with a high-impact role in an existing organization. Now, speaking of those organizations, one of the most important elements for success is the work host readiness to use this talent. And that is a critical element. I don't know, Carol, do you want to mention a little bit about your experience there in Arizona about work host readiness?
I'd be happy to. Thank you, Leslie. In the Phoenix metro area, we have sponsored Temple University's Learning Lab, and about 80 nonprofits have gone through that Learning Lab now. What we have found is that if you just say to a nonprofit, here you go, here's an older adult who has lots of skills and lots of talents, and they'll really be able to help you. In many cases, the nonprofit doesn't understand that this isn't a typical volunteer, that this is a skilled kind of person who's looking for episodic or project-based or part-time kind of meaningful work. And so the nonprofit organization has to be able to define what are the things they would like this person to do? How are they going to recruit them? To whom will they report? so that there's a real good communication strategy for that person within the organization.
Thank you, Carol. Let me move on to another element here, which is the rigorous recruitment selection. Sorry there. So another element is a multi-step process looking at the needs of the nonprofit as well as the skills, experience, and interests of the fellow. And there is a high-quality, high-touch process involved in making that match to make sure that the fellow is in a position to make that contribution and that work host is ready, as Carol mentioned. So, that's probably the second element that I wanted to highlight that is critical for success. Earlier I mentioned the compensation and value. I wanted to point out that in almost all of the programs and in the program design, compensation is part of the equation, and that it's a shared commitment between, let's say, a nonprofit that is hosting the fellow as well as a sponsor from a corporation or a foundation that is supporting that compensation and the program cost. We feel that sort of shared skin in the game is critical, and so that has been built in, and I think that has really added to the quality and commitment that you see in each fellowship. I'm not going to touch on all of the elements, but I will say that these elements all play into it, and they work together to make sure that the experience is high quality and actually successful. Next slide. So let's talk about success. I think Patty mentioned that she's very much into metrics, as we are, and we carefully evaluate the results of each fellowship and have embedded evaluation into the program design. So let me take you through a little bit of the metrics that we've gathered since the program started in 2009 up to just this month. We look at 4 major metrics. There are others, but I want to just cover these 4. And these are 4 graphs that reflect input directly from the nonprofits and the fellows. The first thing we look at is overall satisfaction, and that graph is up in the upper left. We look at, does the nonprofit experience and expect lasting impact from the fellowship? That's in the upper right. Third metric is the nonprofit likely to hire from the private sector after having a fellow? That's in the lower left. And in the lower right is the fellow likely to stay in the nonprofit sector? So all of these metrics reflect the basic theory of change here, which is that professionals in the second stage of work can have a lasting impact, change sectors, and that we can actually influence the hiring practices of nonprofits to consider Encore talent in their hiring practices. So in this chart, green is good, red is not so good. And you can see from the abundance of green that the results have been outstanding. And of course, we're very happy about this. Just quickly, up in the upper left, you see the satisfaction, and this is directly reported from the fellows and work hosts. You see close to 95, 98% satisfied and very satisfied, both sides, and the great majority are very satisfied. And that, of course, is huge because that means that they're getting their needs met. Also important is, does the nonprofit expect lasting impact? We measure that twice during the fellowship, once an interim point about halfway through, and then on the final completion of the program. And you see there 80 to 90% of the work hosts expect lasting impact from their fellow and are experiencing that. That's a tremendous statement in terms of the value that the fellows are delivering. The third element is the impact on the nonprofit hiring Encore talent from the private sector. And there you see before versus after the fellowship, a significant positive impact in terms of the nonprofit likelihood to hire Encore talent from the private sector. So nothing speaks like experience. And correspondingly, you see that the fellow, after the fellowship, is much more likely to want to stay in the nonprofit sector as a result of that experience. So what we feel very good about these results. They've been very consistent from the pilot, even as we've expanded to other cities, to other states, to other communities, similar results. And so that's very encouraging about the model and the ability of the model to extend into new communities. Okay, so that's the evaluation results. We spoke earlier about the amount of media interest that there has been in the program, and there has been sustained and high media interest in the Encore idea and in the Encore Fellows program. And I would say just about once a month there is a major article written about Encore Fellows in a variety of media outlets, including Wall Street Journal, New York Times, the Arizona Republic, NPR. There is just tremendous interest in the Encore stage of life and the idea of people making a contribution in this stage of life, not just Encore Fellows, but other Encore programs. And we've been very happy with that exposure, and it brings it to many more people to learn about it. Okay, next slide. So quick rundown on the key roles. Of course, you want to have some structure behind the program. Top two boxes show that there are fellows who are skilled, experienced professionals, and their work hosts. Social purpose organizations, including nonprofits, schools, government agencies. There are funding sponsors, grant-making individuals or organizations, but also the nonprofit work hosts themselves contribute half to whole of the stipend. At the center of all of this is a local program operator. It can be a community organization, a nonprofit. There are various organizations that are running it in their program, in their community. Very importantly, what we believe is that this program needs to be contextualized to the community where it's operating. And so there's not a single model of who should operate this program. Carol is going to describe what is happening in Maricopa County, but I would also tell you that there are other types of nonprofits that are running this program on behalf of their communities, including one foundation is running this on behalf of their community. So I think the program is quite flexible in how that program operator role works, which allows it to work within the context of whatever community it's going to. So that's the key roles. I won't go into any more detail, but I certainly welcome your engagement on how this actually works, either later on in the Q&A or follow up with me later. Okay, next slide. So a little bit about the Encore Fellowships Network. I think this is my last one. Just to summarize, it's bringing cross-sector skills and experience to the nonprofit talent market. It's autonomous organizations working together in a networked way. And it is sponsored by local foundation companies and participating nonprofits. We've been very pleased with the results so far, and we're looking forward to having it offered and become a part of other communities. Next slide. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Carol to share her case study on what has happened in Maricopa County, and I think you'll find this to be a very exciting story. Over to you, Carol.
Thank you, Leslie, and thank you, Deborah and Patty and Leslie, for inviting me to be part of this webinar. I would like to just share a little bit about Piper Trust with you to give you kind of an understanding of what kind of a foundation we are, and maybe it would be helpful in terms of comparison with your individual foundations. So next slide, please. And on the next slide, you can see a picture of our founder, Virginia Piper. She was the widow of Paul Galvin, who founded Motorola. And when she died in 1999, she had set up a foundation with a $500 million corpus to focus just on the Phoenix area, Maricopa County area. So over the past 11 years, we have granted about $258 million, and we are only place-based. We're only here in Maricopa. So the advantage of that is that we really do get to know the nonprofits and the organizations in our community and have been able to kind of create some things that maybe we wouldn't have had a chance to do otherwise. If you look at the next slide, you can see that we have a variety of funding areas: healthcare and medical research, arts and culture, children, education, older adults, and religious organizations. So older adults is simply one piece of the funding areas that we do. If you look at the next slide, as we began our grant making 11 years ago, we literally had a blank sheet of paper. We thought, what on earth, you could drive a truck through any one of those 6 guideline areas. So we began some research and some community meetings to see what should we use as a philosophical and principle foundation for each of our core areas. In terms of older adults, we ended up with the Roe and Con 6 aging. And so in grant making older adults, we have 3 elements that we follow: disease and disability prevention, physical and mental health, and rewarding and productive activities, i.e. civic engagement. The first 2 are pretty simple in terms of what kinds of programs are out there that we could look at. The last one was really difficult because as we began this work in about 2002, 2003, there were no models. I mean, nobody even knew what civic engagement was. Nobody had heard of an Encore Fellow. The model for older adults was you retire Friday and you go into a nursing home on Monday. So then Mark Friedman's work started with, wait a second, we have 20 to 30 years of productive time before frailty begins for most people, and they're looking for ways to communicate and contribute and participate in making communities a better place. But there were very few mechanisms for them to be able to do that. So if you look at the next slide, what we found we had to do was actually create some things. And you can see my efforts at PowerPoint. We needed to really look at where would we ask people to volunteer or work or connect in the nonprofit world. If you have people who are energized and anxious to really help their communities, we had no place to put them or refer them. And so we looked for national programs to bring to our area. And one of the first ones that we did was the Experience Corps program, where older adults tutor and mentor children. We then looked at several other things, the AmeriCorps program with 50-plus or 55-plus folks, and look for pieces of things. We don't have a volunteer center here in Maricopa County, and so we ended up having to help create an organization called Experience Matters. Experience Matters began as kind of a project that was hooked onto our community foundation because we didn't want to create a nonprofit until we saw whether or not there was some traction, whether there was some support for that concept. It is now forming its own nonprofit, its own board, and it has really moved in many different directions in terms of this concept of older adults engaging in meaningful work. One of the projects that they have put into place is Encore Fellows. We looked at the pilot program in Silicon Valley and found that there was a lot of evidence-based evaluations coming out of the program about the benefit of the program to the nonprofits. And so I don't know if you ever follow Arizona and its budget, but our nonprofits are in dire need of resource as their state funding is cut and cut and cut. And so what we did was to work with Experience Matters to create the Encore Fellows program. They are currently in the process of placing the second class of Encore Fellows. They have placed, for the first year, 13. Our trustees have just supported 4 more, and so we will sponsor a total of 15 over the 2 years. And I think that the slide that you're looking at now is really probably the most important lesson that we've learned over the past couple of years. And that this is really, Nora Hanna at Experience Matters describes it as a bow tie, with the supply side of older adults who are interested in engaging in the community, and the right side, the demand side, with the nonprofits or governmental organizations, and the key, essential key piece of the match. How do you find people whose skills and talents match the job requirements or the project requirements of the nonprofit? And then how do you continue to work with both sides of that equation to make sure it's a good match and that there are good outcomes from the project? So I think if anyone is looking at doing an Encore Fellowship, really consider what you need to do to work with the older adult, what you need to do to work with the nonprofit, and then who's going to have that function or implement that function of the match and the continuous monitoring to make sure that it's a good project. So that said, I wanted to, for the next slide, I wanted to show you a little bit about actually what folks are doing here in the Phoenix area. And that's probably the host. Well, you can go to the next one. Folks can look at the other one at their leisure. But these are the actual agencies that we have Encore Fellows in 2011. So if you look at them, and you can see that they're the Alliance of Nonprofits, there are several animal welfare, there's an Arizona Foundation for Women, the Science Center, a school district, a healthcare organization, a food bank, a community action program, and even the United Way. For those of you who do not fund in older adults, you can see through this list of placements the value these folks bring to organizations that probably do fall within your funding guidelines. If you fund in the area of animals or in healthcare or kids or education, these folks can be placed in those types of nonprofits or governmental entities and bring wonderful resources that they don't have, that those organizations don't normally have access to. We have very, very good comments back from the nonprofits. We've had a good evaluation in process for the first cohort, and some of the comments are like, we hope for and got a person with excellent skills and leadership to facilitate a strategic and business planning process for the Alliance for Companion Animals. So this isn't older adults, this is an animal welfare organization. Another comment, the fact that our fellow has really taken leadership over the project. Another new perspective, dedication, business acumen, quick study. So you can see that these kinds of folks bring a wonderful resource to organizations regardless of the funding area that your foundation may have as its core areas. So next slide, please. So what we've done here at Piper is really to be probably the principal funder for the Encore Fellows program. As I mentioned, we have 15 that we've now funded. Our trustees just added 4 more last Monday. And we've also been kind of the core funder and probably godmother, perhaps, for Experience Matters to make sure that there is a community base from which this work can be done. It does require an organization that gets it, that understands that these folks present a resource and that Encore Fellows can be a wonderful tool in the toolbox. So anyone who is interested in doing this kind of a program in your particular area, we would be happy to provide any kind of information. There was one of the slides, I think, at the beginning. We have a notebook on civic engagement on our website that you can look to that shows different kinds of projects that we've been involved with in terms of civic engagement. So if you go to the Piper Trust website, into publications, it's called Civic Engagement. And I would suggest that it might give you some different examples of how you might utilize Encore Fellows in the various areas in which you fund. And as I said, I'd be happy to answer any questions. So thank you very much, and I'll go back to Deborah or Leslie.
Thanks, Carol. This is Leslie. So, Patty, do we want to keep going here, or are there any questions that are cropping up?
I have no questions on my chat screen, but we can take questions from anyone that wants to, or we can continue with the what's happening in the Southeast.
Okay. I'm going to just pause here.
Okay, we've got one raised hand. Excuse me.
Okay.
I'm trying to find it. Yes,
Leslie,
there, Deborah.
Yeah, Leslie, could you talk about, or Carol, both, the size of nonprofits where Encore Fellows works the best? Because it does take a contribution from them. It does take certain capacity. Where's the sweet spot of success?
Well, this is Carol. I can tell you from the list of folks that you saw on the where our 2011 class is placed, it's all different sizes. I think probably the key element is not as much size as understanding of the value this kind of resource can bring to the organization, and the crafting of a specific job description or task for that person to be really integrally involved in the organization. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but we have all sizes on our list.
Okay, I have a question from the audience about corporate funding. Has it been difficult to get, or have you pursued corporate funding?
Let me just see if I understand the question. Is the question, has it been difficult to get corporate funding? Is that the question?
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me try and answer that. In fact, we've had quite a few corporate sponsors who have been involved in the program, including Hewlett-Packard, Cisco, Goldman Sachs, PetSmart Charities, a few companies up in the Northwest. Intel Corporation has been one of the biggest sponsors. And so they have been involved, and there continues to be reach out to corporations. The way that they have been involved is typically actually in a number of different ways. Certainly they are a source of talent, and they also have offered financial support. Their financial support has come in a number of ways, but the two most common are through the philanthropic foundation of the company, supporting fellows at their grantees, and that's been very common. And very often those are their former employees. The other way that companies have supported the program is through actually their corporate human resources department, making the opportunity to be a fellow a part of their retirement or other human resource offering. And that's the example, for instance, of what we have seen with Intel, which has supported its retiree-eligible population with the opportunity to become Encore Fellows. So that's an example where it's a value to the company through their human resources department. Sometimes it's part of the retiree portfolio. It might be a tool as part of, say, a restructuring or a mobility program for their employees. We've also seen it be used as part of the employee alumni or retiree network program. So just to wrap up there, yes, we have seen that corporations have engaged. They have found value in it, both philanthropically but also in terms of employee relations and in market engagement. I hope that answers the question.
Okay. Let me ask a follow-up to that, and then I think Deborah's got a couple of questions. Are chambers of commerce involved in any way?
Typically they are involved, the chambers of commerce. What we find in each community is that there is an organization, typically the program host, who does a reach out to the Chamber of Commerce. In a few moments here, I'm going to turn it over to Daryl Coker to explain kind of what he's done in Little Rock, and the Chamber of Commerce has been one of his partners in this. Certainly the Chamber of Commerce has played a convening role in terms of supporting the program in almost every community, and that's one of the supporting parties in the program.
Okay. All right. Deborah, would you like to ask one of your questions?
Yeah, actually I've got a few I would like to hit upon. Leslie, could you talk a little bit more about if say it's a community who has a nonprofit resource center who would like to be a program operator? Number one, how do they learn how to do it? And number two, do they get any money out of this, or is it all they got to go find the money? How does that work?
A very good question, Deborah. So a good fit in terms of a potential organization to host the program and operate the program is the Nonprofit Resource Center. We have two organizations that are nonprofit resource centers today who are running programs, one in Sacramento and one in Albuquerque. And of course, it's a great fit with their mission. The way that the organizations learn about the program is to contact myself, since I am the national director, as well as consult with the Encore.org website, which is the Civic Ventures website for their programs. It's a public website, and on there, if you go to Encore.org/fellowships, there's a whole set of resources that are under Start a Program. Beyond those resources, though, I will say that we offer technical assistance to those organizations in learning about the program, a well-defined program design process, and there's a huge investment that has been made in making tools available, robust tools, to run the program, design the program, so that the local program isn't investing in that. And so one of the reasons we exist is to make that process of starting up and operating the program as easy, simple, and cost-effective as possible. So that's all exists and is available. Now, to the question of does the nonprofit that's hosting the program get money? Where do they get the, how does this work? Civic Ventures is not a grant-making organization. So the way this works, and the theory is that each organization or each community needs to identify and support the program itself. So the program operator does raise its funds locally from local foundations, corporations, and the nonprofits itself. Typically, it's raising funds to support the stipends, but also its program operations. So yes, then the idea there is that, again, skin in the game and sustainability. Deborah, did that answer the question?
Yeah, that's excellent. Could you flip to the other side now about how many Encore fellows does a region need, and how does a fellow learn how to be a good fellow? What's the selection process?
So I'll take this in two separate pieces, and actually I'm probably going to go to Carol for the second one because she has great experience there. Typically, a program has anywhere between 6 to 8, maybe 10 fellows to start. Carol mentioned that in their program they had 13 or 14 programs, 13 or 14 fellows to start. Average would be about 8. And we have a couple programs that started with as little as 5 or 6. But to be sustainable and I think to be a robust experience, you want about 8. In terms of how fellows hear about it, there's a great word of mouth. There's a lot of media. There's a lot of outreach and recruiting. The companies talk about it. So we have a very strong network of people and organizations that spread the word about how programs are available. But again, the program operator uses their own network. I'm going to turn to Carol to maybe describe a little bit about the fellow experience and what they received during the course of their year. Carol, do you want to talk about what Experience Matters is doing?
Sure, I'd be happy to. One of the questions dealt with the selection. What we have found, Experience Matters has done several orientation sessions where we have provided information on Encore Fellowships to people who might be interested in it. At the first orientation session, there were 70 people, which led me to come upstairs and ask for more support from the trust so that we wouldn't lose some of these folks. The second orientation session had about 50 to 60 folks. And these are people, I was listening to the descriptions, people who really are folks who have had varied careers, have wonderful careers, and now are tired of just having all leisure time. Each of the candidates has to submit an application to Experience Matters in a format that talks about what they want to do, why they want to do it, how they want to do it. Experience Matters offers Explore Your Future workshop to individuals who are interested in not only in Encore Fellows but other kinds of things. And so you have people who are getting information or thinking through what they want to do, how they want to do it. Encore Fellows becomes one option. The person then who gets through the application process, there is personal interview by Experience Matters, and then people from Experience Matters work with the individual to set up appointments at three different appointments at nonprofit organizations that need someone with those skills to see what the match is like. As they go through, a match is chosen. The nonprofit gets to say this is a good match. The person gets to say this is a good match. But then through the program year, there's ongoing consultation with both parties, and there are networking sessions with the fellows themselves. So they get together and share information and learn new information during the year. Does that answer your question?
Great.
Okay. We have 5 minutes left, and I think we want to hear about what's happening in the Southeast.
Okay. Thanks, Patty, for the prompt. Let's go ahead and go to Daryl Coker first. And Daryl, if you could give us kind of an update on what's happening there in Little Rock, and then if you could, and then we'll turn it over to Betsy to wrap up with what's happening in North Carolina.
Okay, thank you. This is Daryl Coker. I'm pleased to visit with all of you. I'm a longtime businessman and entrepreneur in Little Rock, and became acquainted with the program in the fall of 2010, got to know Leslie and later Mark Friedman, and had Mark here in Little Rock in March of last year to speak to the Clinton School of Public Service, which is unique, where you get a master's degree in public service. So I've been working in 2 areas of the state to try and launch the program. One is Central Arkansas, and the other is Northwest Arkansas. Both areas of the state have a population base, have boomers, and they have the nonprofits. Have worked mostly in Central Arkansas for the last year, meeting with foundations, both local and regional and national, corporations and philanthropic individuals, have money commitments from individuals, but still waiting at this time on the key lead sponsor, which is what it's going to take, and that won't surprise the people on this call. Northwest Arkansas just started active work up there within the last month to 2 months, totally different dynamics with some major corporations like Walmart and J.B. Hunt, the largest trucking company, and Tyson Foods. So they tend to anchor that area of the state, and their involvement is pretty critical in programs that succeed or fail there. So the efforts are very ongoing. It's a matter of just meeting with the potential funding sources, and then if that develops, then moving into the active phase of launching a program.
Betsy.
And Betsy?
Yes, good. Thank you all very much for the opportunity to talk about North Carolina, which is near and dear to my heart. It turns out I'm Betsy Ballafone, and in 2010 I had the opportunity and privilege really to become an Encore Fellow myself. So I've had the 1-year experience as a Silicon Valley Encore Fellow, and beyond that, I had the unique pleasure to be placed with the Encore Fellowships Network team. So I have seen this really blossom beautifully under Leslie Louie's leadership, and have experienced what a real startup can look like in a nonprofit environment. So it's been a real privilege, and I've learned from the inside out, and have had a firsthand view of the whole process. But in North Carolina, where I went to undergraduate and graduate school, we've decided that we would take this great idea and introduce it to the state, across the state. It's currently in the initial discovery phase, I must say. We've had opportunities to speak with representatives from a number of the community, family, and corporate foundations, along with nonprofit executives and potential fellows. Each group has been enthusiastic about the potential capacity-building impact that these Encore Fellows can have in the nonprofit environment. we're very fortunate that the Community Foundation of Greater Greensboro is currently serving as our fiscal agent for our organization at this moment. We're working on a short-term strategy over the next year or two to partner with some existing local organizations who want to bring Encore fellowships into their communities. We've started in the Greensboro Triad area. We're working now with those in Charlotte. The Research Triangle Park area is certainly ripe for this type of development, as well as Wilmington and Asheville. Our longer-term vision in the next 2 to 3 years really would be to provide a standalone organization that would support a whole network of programs, because we believe that the demand for these Encore services will be dramatic. Of course, all of these plans, just like Daryl mentioned, are dependent on securing funding, and we're looking now to identify partners who share this vision and want to be leaders in launching the program. So that's where we stand, and we look forward to talking further with anybody else on the line who is interested in bringing the program to North Carolina, and my contact information is available. So please give me a call.
Thank you, Betsy, and thank you, Daryl, and particularly thank you, Deborah, Leslie, and Carol. We are at the 4 o'clock hour, and we insist on limiting this to just 1 hour. We have the resources here on the slides. Someone has asked for copies of the slides, which we will provide for you, and this recording will be posted at the Southeastern Council's YouTube channel within the next couple of days, and you can share it from there, review it, or whatever. Please don't forget to fill out the webinar survey as you leave the ReadyTalk site, and don't forget our webinar next month, April 18th. It's home-based primary care for older adults and is sponsored by the Jesse Parker Williams Foundation and presented by Dr. Edward Espinoza, the medical director of the Physician House Call Program of Visiting Nurse Hospice Atlanta. And thank you again all. This has been a very exciting program, and we appreciate all your efforts. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Please stand by.